The blood streaking down Violet Graves' temple was the first thing Gabriel Xanders noticed as the morning sun broke over the endless Nebraska plains. Her crumpled form, barely visible among the tall grass and wildflowers that bordered his property. It was 1876, and North Platte was still finding its footing as more than just a stop on the Union Pacific Railroad. Gabriel had been up since before dawn, riding the boundaries of his modest ranch, checking fences and tracking a mountain lion that had been threatening his cattle. He hadn't expected to find a woman half dead at the edge of his property. Gabriel dismounted his chestnut mare with practiced ease, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached cautiously, his weathered hand resting on the revolver at his hip, a habit born from years on the frontier. As he drew closer, he realized she was still breathing, though each breath came shallow and labored. "Madam," he called softly, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, striking green eyes clouded with pain and fear. Blood matted her auburn hair, and her simple calico dress was torn and soiled with dirt and grass stains. Her left cheek bore the unmistakable imprint of a man's hand, and bruises in various stages of healing peeked out from beneath her collar. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He will come back." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Who did this to you, madam?" "My husband," she managed before her eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness again. Gabriel gently lifted her into his arms, surprised by how little she weighed. He settled her carefully across his saddle before mounting behind her, supporting her limp body against his chest. "He will answer for that," Gabriel muttered grimly as he turned his horse toward home, the woman's head lolling against his shoulder. "I promise you that." The ride back to Gabriel's ranch took nearly an hour. By the time the modest two-story clapboard house came into view, Violet had regained consciousness but remained disoriented and weak. Mrs. Peterson, the widow who kept house for Gabriel, emerged onto the porch at the sound of hoofbeats, her round face transitioning from curiosity to alarm. "Good heavens, Mr. Xanders, what's happened?" she called, hurrying down the steps despite her arthritic knees. "Found her out by the east boundary," Gabriel explained, carefully dismounting while supporting Violet. "She's been beaten something fierce. Her husband's work, she says." Mrs. Peterson's mouth set in a hard line. "Bring her in, then. Some men don't deserve the title." She bustled ahead to prepare a bed. Gabriel carried Violet into the house, following Mrs. Peterson upstairs to the spare bedroom. The room was simple but clean, with a sturdy oak bed, a washstand, and curtains that Mrs. Peterson had sewn herself from flour sacks. "I'll tend to her, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "You go fetch Dr. Miller." Gabriel nodded and strode out, his footfalls heavy on the wooden stairs. As he rode toward town, his thoughts churned like an angry river. North Platte had its share of roughness, every frontier town did, but a man who would leave his wife for dead was something altogether different. Dr. Miller arrived at Gabriel's ranch an hour later, medical bag in hand. He was a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression, one of the few doctors who'd chosen to build a practice in the Nebraska territory rather than chase gold or land. "She's awake now," Mrs. Peterson informed them, "but she's not saying much." The doctor nodded and followed her upstairs. Gabriel remained downstairs, pacing the length of his modest parlor, pausing occasionally to look out the window toward the road. If her husband was searching for her, Gabriel wanted to be ready, Dr. Miller descended the stairs some time later, his face grave. "Well," Gabriel demanded. "She's been severely beaten," Dr. Miller said, closing his bag. "3 broken ribs, numerous contusions, possible concussion. There are older injuries as well, a partially healed fracture in her wrist, scarring on her back." He removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief. "This isn't the first time she's been abused, Mr. Xanders. From the pattern of injuries, I'd say it's been going on for some time." Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. "Will she recover?" "Physically, yes, given time and care." The doctor replaced his spectacles. "The rest, that depends on her, and whether her husband finds her." "He won't touch her again," Gabriel said with quiet certainty, Doctor. Miller gave him a measured look. "Don't go doing anything foolish, Xanders. Sheriff Davis should handle this," Gabriel snorted. "Davis couldn't handle a drunk child, let alone a wife-beater." "Nevertheless," Dr. Miller insisted, "the law must take its course." After the doctor left, Gabriel climbed the stairs to check on their patient. Mrs. Peterson was sitting beside the bed, coaxing the woman to sip some broth. "This is Mr. Xanders," Mrs. Peterson said gently. "He's the one who found you." The woman's green eyes fixed on Gabriel, wary but clear now. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Violet Graves." She paused, swallowing painfully. "Though I suppose it's still Violet Harmon legally." "You're safe here, Mrs. Harmon," Gabriel assured her, staying near the door to avoid frightening her. "Please," she said, wincing as she tried to sit up straighter. "Just Violet," Gabriel nodded. "Can you tell us what happened, Violet? Who did this to you?" Violet's hands trembled around the cup of broth. "My husband, Raymond Harmon. We have a homestead about 15 miles northeast of here." She took a shaky breath. He's always had a temper, but lately it's been worse. He drinks more since we lost the baby." Mrs. Peterson made a sympathetic noise and patted Violet's hand. "Last night he came home drunk. I'd burned the stew." A bitter laugh escaped her, followed by a grimace of pain. "Such a small thing. He beat me worse than ever before. I thought he would kill me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I think he thought he had. He dragged me outside, threw me in the wagon. I remember the stars above me as he drove. Then he pulled me out and left me there. I heard him say, 'Let the coyotes have what's left.'" Gabriel's expression hardened. "How long have you been married?" 3 years, she replied. "We came west from Pennsylvania after we wed. Ray had dreams of building a cattle empire." A shadow crossed her face. "Dreams that died in the drought last year." Gabriel exchanged a glance with Mrs. Peterson. They both knew how the harsh realities of frontier life could break a man, but there was no excuse for what Harmon had done. "You need rest," Mrs. Peterson declared, taking the empty cup. "We can talk more tomorrow," Gabriel nodded. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to heal, Violet." As they left the room, Gabriel's mind was made up. Raymond Harmon would answer for what he'd done one way or another. Over the next week, Violet slowly regained her strength. The bruises on her face faded from angry purple to sickly yellow, and she began to move about more freely, though her ribs still pained her. Mrs. Peterson fussed over her like a mother hen, and Gabriel found himself increasingly drawn to the quiet courage Violet displayed. One evening, Gabriel found Violet sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Her auburn hair, now clean and brushed, caught the fading light. He noticed she'd borrowed one of Mrs. Peterson's dresses, altered to fit her smaller frame. "May I join you?" he asked, standing at the edge of the porch. Violet nodded, offering a small smile. "It's your porch, Mr. Xanders." "Gabriel," he corrected, settling into the chair beside her. "Mr. Xanders was my father." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sun sink below the horizon. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely howl echoing across the plains. "I've been thinking," Violet finally said. "About what happens next." Gabriel turned to study her profile. At 28, he'd seen his share of hardship, but there was something about Violet that spoke of a resilience he admired. She couldn't be much past 23, yet her eyes held the wisdom of someone much older. "What do you want to happen next?" he asked. She sighed. "I can't go back to him." "I know that now." Her hands twisted in the fabric of her borrowed dress. "But I have nowhere else to go, no family, no money of my own." "You have time to figure it out," Gabriel assured her. "You're welcome here until you decide." Violet turned to him then, her green eyes searching his face. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Gabriel considered her question. "My mother suffered at my father's hands," he said finally. "Not as badly as you, but enough that I swore I'd never be that kind of man, and I'd never stand by while another man treated a woman that way." "Your mother, is she?" "She died when I was 15, consumption." Gabriel's voice was matter-of-fact, but old pain lingered beneath the words. "My father followed 2 years later, liver gave out from all the whiskey." "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. Gabriel shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I came west after that, worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy this place 5 years back." "You've built something good here," Violet observed, looking out at the well-maintained fences and healthy cattle grazing in the distance. "It's modest, but it's mine," Gabriel agreed. "No debts, no partners, just the way I like it." Except for the loneliness, he thought but didn't say. The empty rooms at night, the meals eaten in silence when Mrs. Peterson went home to her cottage in town. But that wasn't something to burden Violet with, not when she had her own troubles. The next morning, Gabriel rode into North Platte. The town had grown considerably since the railroad came through, boasting several saloons, a hotel, a general store, and various other establishments that served the increasing population. Gabriel hitched his horse outside the sheriff's office and stepped inside. Sheriff Davis was a balding man with a substantial belly and perpetually sweaty collar. He looked up from his desk with obvious reluctance as Gabriel entered. "Xanders," he greeted without enthusiasm. "What brings you to town?" Gabriel removed his hat. "I need to report a crime, Sheriff. Attempted murder." Davis raised his eyebrows. "That's a serious charge. Who's the victim?" "Violet Harmon. Her husband beat her nearly to death and dumped her, thinking she was dead already." Davis leaned back in his chair. "Raymond Harmon, the fellow who homesteaded out past Willow Creek." When Gabriel nodded, Davis sighed. "Where's Mrs. Harmon now, recovering at my ranch?" A knowing look crossed Davis's face. "I see, and how long has she been there?" Gabriel's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" Nothing, Davis said, raising his hands placatingly. "Just that these domestic situations can be complicated. Perhaps Mrs. Harmon fell, or she didn't fall," Gabriel interrupted coldly. "She was beaten and left for dead, Doctor Miller has seen her injuries and can confirm it." Davis drummed his fingers on the desk. "Well, I suppose I should ride out and talk to Harmon, get his side of the story." "His side?" Gabriel repeated incredulously. "There is no his side to attempted murder, Davis." The sheriff stood, hitching up his pants. "Now see here, Xanders, I'll handle this by the book. We don't know that Harmon meant to kill her. Could have been a disagreement that got out of hand." Gabriel's hand twitched toward his gun, but he restrained himself. "Fine. But know this, if you don't deal with Harmon, I will." Davis's face reddened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Gabriel turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. He spent the rest of the morning at the general store, purchasing supplies and trying to cool his temper. Mrs. Peterson had given him a list of items Violet might need, personal things he would never have thought to buy, and he added them to his usual order. As he was loading the supplies into his saddlebags, a commotion further down the street caught his attention. A man was stumbling out of the Silver Dollar Saloon, clearly drunk despite the early hour. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a shock of dirty blonde hair and a week's worth of beard. His clothes were filthy, and he was shouting at anyone who would listen. "She thinks she can leave me." The man bellowed. "My own wife, I'll find her, and when I do." Gabriel froze, recognizing Raymond Harmon from Violet's description. Without conscious thought, his hand moved to his revolver. He could end this right now, put a bullet in the man who'd nearly killed Violet. But as his fingers closed around the grip, he hesitated. Shooting a man in the street, even scum like Harmon, would only land Gabriel in jail or worse, at the end of a rope. And then who would protect Violet? Instead, Gabriel walked back to his horse and mounted up, keeping his eye on Harmon. He would follow the man, learn his routine, and when the time was right, he would make sure justice was served one way or another. When Gabriel returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Violet in the kitchen with Mrs. Peterson, her sleeves rolled up as she helped knead bread dough. The domesticity of the scene struck him how natural she looked in his home. "Mr. Xanders," Mrs. Peterson greeted him. "Did you get everything on the list?" "I did," he confirmed, setting the packages on the table. He hesitated, then added, "I saw your husband in town, Violet." The color drained from her face. "Ray, was he looking for me?" Gabriel nodded grimly. "He was drunk, making a scene at the Silver Dollar." He didn't mention Harmon's threats, no need to frighten her further. Violet's hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. "He'll come here. He'll find out where I am." "He won't harm you," Gabriel promised. "I've spoken to Sheriff Davis and I'll be keeping watch." Mrs. Peterson huffed. That Davis couldn't find his own backside with both hands and a map, but Mr. Xanders here, he's a man of his word. She patted Violet's arm. "Now let's finish this bread before the dough overrises." That night, after Mrs. Peterson had gone home, Gabriel sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the prairie. In the distance, a wolf howled, and the cattle shifted nervously in their pen. The door opened behind him, and Violet stepped out, wrapped in a shawl against the cool night air. "You should be resting," Gabriel said, not unkindly. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, settling into the chair beside him. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Gabriel nodded, understanding. It will get better with time, will it? She asked softly. Sometimes I feel like I'll never be free of him. You will be, Gabriel assured her. I promise you that. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Gabriel was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the faint scent of lavender soap, the way her breath made small clouds in the cool air. Tell me something good, Violet said suddenly. Something that has nothing to do with Ray or what happened. Gabriel thought for a moment. When I was a boy in Missouri, there was this old apple tree behind our house. Every autumn, I would climb up as high as I could go and hide among the branches, eating apples until my stomach ached. He smiled at the memory. My mother always knew where to find me, but she'd pretend she didn't, calling my name while standing right under the tree. It was our little game. Violet smiled, a genuine one that reached her eyes. She sounds wonderful. She was, Gabriel agreed. She would have liked you. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and he tensed, worried he'd overstepped, but Violet's smile only softened. I think I would have liked her too, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Gabriel worked his ranch during the day, always keeping one eye on the horizon. Violet grew stronger, helping Mrs. Peterson with household tasks and gradually sharing more of herself. Gabriel learned she loved to read, that she could name every wildflower on the prairie, that she had a talent for sketching that her husband had discouraged. One evening, after Mrs. Peterson had gone, Gabriel found Violet in the parlor with one of his books open on her lap, a volume of Tennyson's poetry he'd brought with him from Missouri. I hope you don't mind, she said, looking up as he entered. I found it on your shelf. Not at all, he assured her, settling into the chair opposite. It was my mother's. Poetry was her refuge. Violet traced the faded gold lettering on the cover. Mine too once, before Ray. She hesitated, then asked, would you like me to read some? My father always said I had a voice for verse. Gabriel nodded, and Violet began to read. Her voice transformed the familiar words, giving them new life and meaning. Gabriel found himself watching her lips form each syllable, the way her expression changed with the emotion of the poem. When she finished, the silence between them felt charged with something new and fragile. You read beautifully, Gabriel said at last, a blush colored Violet's cheeks. Thank you. It's been a long time since anyone wanted to hear me read. I would listen to you read the entire book, Gabriel admitted. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Then Violet looked away, closing the book carefully. It's getting late, she said. I should retire. Gabriel stood as she rose. Of course. Good night, Violet. Good night, Gabriel. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it in her voice followed him into his dreams that night. The peaceful routine was shattered 3 days later when Sheriff Davis rode up to the ranch just as Gabriel was finishing the morning chores. Violet was hanging laundry in the yard, and Gabriel saw her freeze at the sight of the lawman. Morning, Xanders, Davis called, dismounting heavily. Mrs. Harmon, Gabriel moved to stand protectively near Violet. What brings you out here, Sheriff? Davis removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Had a talk with Raymond Harmon. He's claiming his wife ran off, took some valuables with her. His eyes shifted to Violet. Says he's been looking all over for her, worried sick. Violet's hands clenched around the damp shirt she'd been about to hang. That's a lie, she said, her voice remarkably steady. He beat me and left me for dead. Davis looked uncomfortable. Well, madam, it's his word against yours. And he is your lawful husband. Gabriel stepped forward. Did you not see her injuries? Did Dr. Miller not confirm the beating? He did, Davis admitted, but Harmon claims she fell from a horse. Says she's prone to accidents, and legally speaking, a husband has certain rights. Gabriel interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. You think a man has the right to beat his wife half to death? Davis raised his hands placatingly. Now, Xanders, I'm not saying that, but the law is complicated when it comes to marriage. Harmon wants his wife to come home, and legally I can't stop him from taking her. Violet made a small, frightened sound, and Gabriel moved closer to her. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go, he stated firmly. If Harmon wants to press the issue, he can come here himself. Davis's face reddened. Are you defying the law, Xanders? I'm upholding it, Gabriel countered. The law against attempted murder. Now, unless you're here to arrest me, I suggest you ride back to town and tell Harmon that his wife is under my protection." For a tense moment, Davis looked like he might argue further, then he jammed his hat back on his head. "You're making a mistake, Xanders. Harmon's not the type to let this go." "Neither am I," Gabriel replied evenly. After Davis left, Violet turned to Gabriel, her face pale. "He'll come for me now, you know he will." Gabriel nodded grimly. "I'm counting on it." "Gabriel, you can't fight him for me. I won't have your blood on my hands." He took her hands in his, noting how small they were against his calloused palms. "Listen to me, Violet. Men like Harmon only understand one thing: force. He needs to know that hurting you has consequences." "And if he kills you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What then?" "He won't," Gabriel assured her, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. That night, Gabriel doubled his vigilance, checking and rechecking his rifle and revolver. He sent Mrs. Peterson home with instructions to stay in town for a few days, despite her protests. The house felt eerily quiet without her bustling presence. Violet moved restlessly through the rooms, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house settling. Finally, as darkness fell, Gabriel convinced her to try to sleep. "I'll be right downstairs," he promised. "No one will get past me." Reluctantly, she climbed the stairs, pausing at the top to look back at him with eyes full of fear and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. It was just past midnight when Gabriel heard the approach of horses. He'd been dozing in his chair by the window, rifle across his lap, but instantly came alert at the sound. Moving silently to the door, he peered through a crack in the curtains. 3 riders were approaching the house, Raymond Harmon in the lead, flanked by 2 men Gabriel didn't recognize. All 3 carried rifles, and even from a distance, Gabriel could tell they'd been drinking. He moved quickly to the bottom of the stairs. "Violet," he called softly. "They're here." She appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale in the dim lamplight. She dressed again, as if she'd been expecting this moment. "Stay upstairs and away from the windows," Gabriel instructed. "If shooting starts, get under the bed." Violet descended the stairs instead, her chin set determinedly. "No, I won't hide while you risk your life for me." Before Gabriel could argue, a voice boomed from outside. "Xanders, send my wife out, and maybe I won't burn your ranch to the ground." Gabriel checked his revolver one last time. "Stay behind me," he told Violet, then opened the door and stepped onto the porch, keeping his body between her and the men outside. Raymond Harmon sat on his horse about 20 yards from the house, a rifle resting across his saddle. In the moonlight, Gabriel could see he was a big man, probably outweighing him by 30 pounds at least. His companions were similarly built, rough-looking men with hard eyes. "Evening, Harmon," Gabriel called, his voice deceptively calm. "You're trespassing on my property." Harmon spat on the ground. "I've come for what's mine. My wife belongs at home, not playing house with you." "Your wife," Gabriel replied, "is exactly where she wants to be, and after what you did to her, you're lucky I didn't hunt you down and put a bullet in you." Harmon laughed, an ugly sound. "Big talk from a man who steals another man's wife. Violet, get your worthless hide out here now." To Gabriel's surprise, Violet stepped forward to stand beside him. "I'm not coming back, Ray," she called, her voice steadier than Gabriel would have expected. "Not now, not ever." Harmon's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful whore, after everything I've done for you." "You mean like beating me until I couldn't stand?" Violet shot back. "Or leaving me to die in the grass like an animal? Yes, I'm so ungrateful." "That's enough talk," Harmon snarled, raising his rifle. "You're coming home if I have to drag you." Gabriel's revolver was in his hand before Harmon could take aim. "Lower your weapon, Harmon. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed." For a moment, the tableau held 3 mounted men with rifles facing one man with a revolver and a woman with nothing but her courage. Then one of Harmon's companions shifted nervously, and the tension broke. "Last chance, Xanders," Harmon growled. "Step aside and let me take my wife." Gabriel's finger tightened on the trigger. "She's not property, Harmon. She's a person who deserves better than a coward who beats women." With a roar of rage, Harmon raised his rifle. Gabriel shoved Violet behind him and fired in one smooth motion. His bullet struck Harmon in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around in his saddle. The big man dropped his rifle, clutching at the wound. One of Harmon's companions fired wildly, the bullet splintering wood on the porch railing. Gabriel took aim and put a round through the man's arm, causing him to drop his weapon with a howl of pain. The third man threw down his rifle. "I ain't dying for your woman troubles, Ray," he declared, wheeling his horse around and galloping away. Harmon, still in his saddle despite his wound, glared at Gabriel with naked hatred. "This isn't over, Xanders, not by a long shot." "It is over," Gabriel contradicted him. "Violet has made her choice. Now get off my land before I put another bullet in you somewhere more permanent." For a tense moment, Gabriel thought Harmon might call his bluff. Then the injured man yanked his horse's reins and turned away, followed by his wounded companion. They vanished into the darkness, the sound of their horses' hooves fading gradually. Gabriel kept his revolver trained on the spot where they'd disappeared for several minutes, making sure they weren't circling back. When he was satisfied they were truly gone, he holstered his weapon and turned to Violet. She was trembling but standing tall, her green eyes wide but clear. "Will they come back?" she asked. "Not tonight," Gabriel replied. "And if Harmon has any sense, not ever." Violet's composure finally cracked. A sob escaped her, and then another, and suddenly she was in Gabriel's arms, her face pressed against his chest. "It's all right," he murmured, stroking her hair. "You're safe now." "I was so afraid," she confessed, her words muffled against his shirt. "Not for me, for you." Gabriel gently tilted her chin up, looking into her tear-stained face. "Why?" "Because I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you," she whispered. "Because somewhere along the way I started to care for you, more than I should." The admission hung between them, fragile and precious. Gabriel brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I care for you too, Violet," he said softly. "More than is probably wise, given everything you've been through." She leaned into his touch. "You've shown me what a good man is, Gabriel, what it means to be treated with respect and kindness." Her eyes searched his. "I know it's too soon. I know I'm still legally another man's wife, but I want you to know that when I'm free, truly free, my heart already knows where it belongs." Gabriel wanted nothing more than to kiss her then, but he restrained himself. She deserved time to heal, to find her own strength again. Instead, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We have time," he promised. "And I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Sheriff Davis arrived with news Raymond Harmon had left town on the dawn train, apparently headed back east. His companions had spread the word that Harmon had been bested by Gabriel Xanders in a fair fight over Violet, and the humiliation had been too much for the wife-beater to bear. "Reckon he won't be back," Davis concluded, looking slightly embarrassed at his previous stance on the matter. "Mrs. Harmon, Miss Violet, I apologize for not taking your situation more seriously." Violet accepted his apology with grace, though Gabriel noticed she kept a careful distance from the sheriff. Over the following months, Violet began the legal process of divorcing Raymond, a scandalous but increasingly common occurrence in the territories, where women often found more legal rights than in the established eastern states. Gabriel rode with her to every court appearance, standing silent support against the whispers and judgmental looks. By the time winter settled over the prairie, blanketing the land in white, Violet's divorce was finalized, a rare victory made possible by the evidence of her injuries and Raymond's abandonment. The night they received the final papers, Gabriel found Violet standing on the porch despite the cold, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "Are you all right?" he asked, joining her. She turned to him, snowflakes catching in her auburn hair. "For the first time in years, I truly am." A smile curved her lips. "I'm free, Gabriel." He stepped closer, drawn to her like a moth to flame. "What will you do now?" "That depends," she said softly, "on what you want." Gabriel took her hands in his. "I want you to stay, Violet. Not as my guest, not as someone I protected, but as my partner." He paused, suddenly nervous. "If that's what you want too." Violet's answer was to rise on her tiptoes and press her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Gabriel pulled her closer, his arms encircling her waist as her hands found their way into his hair. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed despite the cold, Violet laughed, a free, joyous sound Gabriel had never heard from her before. "I take that as a yes," he asked, grinning. "Yes, Gabriel Xanders," she confirmed, her eyes sparkling. "That's a definite yes." They married the following spring when the prairie was alive with wildflowers. Mrs. Peterson wept openly during the ceremony, and even Sheriff Davis attended, hat in hand and looking genuinely pleased for the couple. Their love grew with the seasons, deepening with each shared sunrise and sunset. Gabriel taught Violet to ride properly and shoot straight, while she filled his home with books and music and laughter. Together, they built a life founded on mutual respect and tenderness, proving that even in the harshest of landscapes, love could not only survive but flourish. 2 years after their wedding, Violet gave birth to a son they named James, after Gabriel's father. As Gabriel held his son for the first time, Violet watching them with tired eyes full of love, he marveled at how finding a woman left for dead had led him to a life more full and rich than he could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Violet asked, reaching for his hand. Gabriel smiled, his heart so full it felt it might burst. "I'm thinking that some promises are worth keeping, no matter the cost." Violet nodded, understanding. They never spoke of Raymond Harmon anymore, but they both knew the truth that day on the porch, when Gabriel had vowed Harmon would answer for what he'd done, had set them both on a path to healing and love. Outside, the Nebraska wind swept across the prairie, carrying the scent of grass and possibility. Inside, a family forged in adversity and bound by love faced the future together, stronger for the storms they'd weathered.